And as people continue to join us, we know that we have a full agenda today. So we're going to jump right in and respect your time. Thank you for joining us. Um, we are so excited. My name is Anna Johnson. I'm the North America Director for the Laudato Si movement. And we are very excited to have you here, all of the different organizations that are working together for this pilgrimage, these pilgrimages of hope for creation. With that, I would like to introduce Dan Misla, who I'm sure you all know, to unmute, come off mute, and to lead us in prayer. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, good morning. I add my welcome to you. Glad that you can be with us for a little bit today. Um, so let's take a few moments to quiet ourselves, to put ourselves in God's presence, to be grateful for this opportunity to be together and to work together on behalf of God's creation. And we pray, God of blessings, the universe sings of your glory. Deepen our gratitude for all you have made and awaken in us a renewed commitment to care for the earth and each other. Inspire world leaders at COP30 with openness to listen to those most affected by climate change, and with courage to act urgently and wisely, so that our common home may be healed and restored, and all people and generations to come may delight in it. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Dan. We are just so overjoyed for all of the pilgrimage reports that are coming in. It has been amazing to be reading your reports, to be reading of the amazing connections that you all have made back with the place where you live and where you worship, the communities that you live around and worship with, reconnecting with God and reconnecting with ourselves throughout these pilgrimage processes. So, a quick recap of where we stand now. The last pilgrimages are wrapping up just now. I think our final one is the one that we have registered right now is in California, pilgrimaging to the Salton Sea. Um, so, we have had over 250 pilgrimages, people out walking through creation and our cities to care for our common home and be reconnecting ourselves within this 42 out of 50 states. That's amazing. We hear a narrative sometimes about what's happening in or around divisiveness and in our country, and the fact that we're in so many places and just across the country is truly inspirational and a good reminder that this work is deeply faith-filled, right? It is a call and a vocation within our faith to do so. Over 6,000 miles have been pilgrimaged throughout the United States. And we don't yet know the numbers because our reports are still coming in, but we know thousands of pilgrims have been out walking on these pilgrimages of hope for creation. We wanted to do just a quick highlight of three great ones that have happened within the last week and a half or so. There was a really beautiful one in Seattle, Washington. They did 4 stops for prayer and reflection along their journey, pilgrimaging from a parish into Piper Creek Park, where the salmon were coming back to do their salmon run. Um, they contemplated the diversity, interdependence, and communion in creation. They said, observing the coho salmon returning to Piper's Creek at the end of our 2-mile walk reminded us all of the sacrifice involved in sustaining life for all on our planet. An incredible one happened in Austin, Texas. I saw Linda joining the call. This pilgrimage of hope for creation traveled on a metro rail, as you can see there, stopped at a community garden, community square in the city, and then walked to a watershed green space in the city, the state capitol building, the African American History Monument, and Catholic Cathedral for Mass. Surrounded by the city's energy and history, participants found hope in their shared steps, a reminder that restoring our relationship with creation is inseparable from restoring our relationship with God. And this one in Dayton, Ohio, this pilgrimage traveled to a nature center, a solar farm of the Sisters of of Precious Blood, a parish garden, and another farm. They used a process of first rooting themselves in gratitude, then recognizing the challenges that are in front of us for this work, deepening a sense of growing in hope, and then a call to be sent forth together in community as they did this. So these are just three amazing reports that have come in through the report form of these hundreds of pilgrimages that have been happening. If you led a pilgrimage and we don't know about it, we want to. So please, we'll drop the form into the chat of how you can report your pilgrimage, give us feedback about how it went, and share some of your stories and pictures so that we can make sure to include them in all these stories that we're telling about the amazing Catholics in the United States who are caring for our common home and journeying together. If you have other pilgrimages that you've held that you want to just put into the chat the location, we would be happy to name that. We know that there's Minnesota, Atlanta. Dan joined the LCWR conference one in Atlanta, Northwest Dayton, pilgrimage to an arboretum in Oregon, Alexandria, a local litter pilgrimage, the Portuguese Camino, faith formation families walking around a city block, stopping for prayers and songs. That must have been so powerful. Thank you, Patty. Texas, Sorrento, BC, 3-day pilgrimage. That's incredible. And let's see here. On the Guadalupe River, accompanying the people of Westmoreland neighborhood and Jamaica after the hurricane, La Crosse, Wisconsin. So even more, thank you so much for the work that you have done to put on these pilgrimages. These, the fact of all of these pilgrimages truly do raise a sense of hope amongst so many of us, amongst the leaders in our organizations who were working together to put this on. At the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, where I know these pilgrimages were talked about last week during their meeting. At across the board, they're being talked about at the COP these times. The Pope knows about them. This work that you have done has raised a lot of hope in the United States and around the world. And so we are so honored to be a part of that journey with each of you. Thank you for the work you have done. Today, we are really excited to talk about how we keep this energy going, right? We know sometimes it can be really easy to mobilize and to build energy around one event. And I just said easy. It's not easy. We all know that, right? Getting the people out, the turnout of 80 people in Texas, Linda, that's amazing. That was not easy, right? We know getting turnout, that's not easy. I'm not trying to say that. But we know that having that energy around an event, part of the challenge that's in front of us is how to sustain that energy and how to move it into community. We know from our faith that we are called to move forward in community, right? And it can feel hard at times as leaders caring for our common home. I know there are times where I feel alone in this work, late at night on my computer writing a prayer reflection for our pilgrimage or something like that. But we know that there are thousands of us out there. And so our work now is to continue to grow the people, to grow the communities who are doing this work. So that's what our call is about today, is to be aware and to reflect on the people who came to your pilgrimage, the people you worked with for your pilgrimage, and that next invitation so that we can keep the energy going. So, oh, and I just wanted to also highlight this. I apologize. Forgot a slide that if you are interested in hearing about more of the pilgrimages, if you go to the website, which I will drop the link in the chat as well in a few moments, there is on the blog pilgrimage spotlights. The comms team behind the scenes are reading through the reports you're putting forward and writing blogs about the amazing pilgrimages that are happening and working with you as leaders to do so. And so you can go there, you can read about it, and if you have a pilgrimage you want spotlighted, again, please send in a report, include some good information in there, and we'll move forward with that as well. So, in order to start thinking about how we would like to move forward, and more importantly, with whom we would like to move forward in our work of caring for creation. We don't want to minimize the amazing work we know a lot of you have done already. A lot of these pilgrimages were planned out of creation care teams or ministries and parishes and universities and hospitals or Laudato Si movement chapters or all sorts of other organizational leads like that in communities you've already got. And you brought people together who can continue to be mobilized. So we'll take a minute now to enter a period of reflection. We invite you to think back over your pilgrimage planning process. And if you didn't do a pilgrimage, you can think of a recent other event you've done with your creation care team or community. From your first steps of planning, perhaps you did the network building that we talked about way back in March. From your first steps of planning, who did you meet with? What did you dream might be possible? As the planning continued and more details got figured out, how did you make decisions and who did you work with to do so? And then think about the pilgrimage itself. Who came? Who helped to make it what it was? Who maybe surprised you by helping clean up or set up or along the way? Who came and who helped to make it what it was? And since then, who has shown excitement about what you did? As you've talked about these pilgrimages in your communities and beyond, who has shown excitement? Who's been interested in this amazing work that you've undertaken? And we'd like to invite you now to go ahead and write down some of those names that are coming to the top of your head. Who are some of those people who are coming to mind for you in this prayerful, reflective space as you think back over this process? And as you look at this list of names, we know that one of the benefits of putting on an event like this is it's an opportunity to continue to build and grow community. In a society, in a culture which is telling us to prioritize individualism, we know that is not the message of Laudato Si. That is not the message of our Gospels, and that is not the way that we will care for and save creation. And so we invite you to think about who are those people you'd like to invite in further into your ministry and into your work. Who would you like to collaborate more with, more frequently, and use their unique gifts and skills in doing so? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Alyssa to lead us through a process of thinking now, how? How do we invite them in more further? So, Alyssa, I invite you to come off mute and open up.
Hello, everyone. So, as Anna said, my name is Alyssa. I'm the North Americans Programs Coordinator. So, as Anna said, we're going to talk about today these conversations that need to happen, also known as, you'll hear me refer to them as one-to-ones. As we are building, we know as people that we're made to be in community. We're made to be connected in community at the root of who we are. As in the image of God, who we are as people is we are made to be in community to give to one another. And so as we do this, we're going to walk through this process of how can this happen? You know, you guys all have these amazing pilgrimages that gained so much energy and gained so many people that showed up, that were together. And so how do we also keep this as we're having conversations to be intentional about that? That we need relationships with intentionality to get to know to know each other. So we're going to talk a little bit about why should we have conversations next. So something to note is Jesus literally sent the disciples in pairs. That they were always going together, announcing the gospel, going together, announcing the good news. And so a lot of the reasons why we need to have conversations next is to be connected in community, to share an end goal, and to understand what actions we can take. There's this African proverb stated below, if we want to go fast, go alone, but if we want to go far, go together. So today we're going to invite you into this process of visioning a little bit of what can you do in your community? What are tangible steps you can do in order to build communities for creation care? So if we can go to the next slide. This is one of my favorite quotes, and by JP2, is that it is not science and technology or the increasing means of economic and material development, but the human person, and especially groups of persons, communities, and nations freely choosing to face the problems together, who will, under God, determine the future. So this is to ground us in why relationship? Why do we need to have these conversations? How do we need to intentionally get to know people? Because we can often become very transactional of like, oh, well, we all care about creation care and we're all together, and so that's it. But is really why? To be in meaningful relationship with each other. And this is something very significant in this quote that I want to draw our attention to as we go into speaking about how to have these conversations, is freely choosing to face the problems together. And this is something very important, that we're called to face the problems together. You know, we saw in the pilgrimages and in a lot of the feedbacks, as Anna was saying when we were reading through it, that a lot of people noted that this was a moment that they felt like they could get together with each other and be in communion and to be in something together. Not to be by ourselves, not to feel like we're alone in this, because it can feel tempting like that. Especially if like, what is going to happen? What's going on? How much can we do truly? And this is something important, because when we're together and we're in relationship, that we can do this in such a powerful way. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what is this conversation structure? How do we have these conversations? How should we go about this? Because sometimes, at least maybe this can be a generational thing, it can be awkward at first to go up to someone and get to know them, especially now in this day and age where we at moments have become very unused to people asking about us. You know, I'm always very struck when someone asks me, Alyssa, why are you doing this? And it strikes me, not necessarily in the work sense, but when it's outside, when someone's like, "Oh, why do you care about climate change?" And it's always something that catches me off guard at first, because I'm like, "Oh, you really want to know." And so this is a little bit about the conversation structure of how to have these conversations. Is that the time of getting, this could be a coffee conversation, you could go meet at a little local cafe, you could be on a walk, is usually about 30 to 60 minutes. 2 ears and 1 mouth. And the space of trust and care. Make the safe space and vulnerability how to both model and receive it. So in this conversation, this is when you were visioning with Anna earlier in this call, is these are the people that we want to invite you to have these conversations with, to ask them. Be like, oh, are you free a Saturday or after Mass or sometime? Can we go get a coffee together? and to go and hear more about them. This should be more of the individual that you are wanting to get to know more, why they care about creation care. They should be the one who's mainly talking. But also for yourself, as you guys are all on this webinar, is that you guys are leaders in this movement. You guys are leaders of creation care in your community. As you are becoming further educated on this, on how to build community, is that you are coming with these tools in your toolkit. And so this is why it's very significant to make it a space that is safe and that models this vulnerability. You know, as we are called by our faith is to live by testimony. That we know that people are struck with our testimonies of why do we care for something. That when we encounter love, that we're able to share this love. And I'm sure and assuming everyone on this call has encountered this love for creation. And this is why you do this. This is simply why you do this, because you've encountered this love in creation. So as the conversation content in this talk, in this one-to-one in preparation, is a space of connection to share your story. You know, I invite you right now to think a little bit, you know, of what is your story? Why do you hop on a Zoom call midday to listen to these people talk, to learn more about pilgrimages? You know, why are you here? Why are you joining this? And to model this story, the story that you have that God has given you through your experience, that is rooted really in the gifts that God has given you and the cares that He has given you as well. But also in curiosity in this space, in this conversation, is to have curiosity of, why did this person come to your pilgrimage? What moves them for creation care? You know, I often hear a lot of people, you know, I even see in the comments of like, thinking of the young people. Young people want to have conversations, guys. And to have this conversation with them is super important. To invite them in these spaces where you're listening of like, why do you care about creation care? Why is this something important to you? To have this curiosity, but then also to include an invitation of what does this look like? Could you invite this person to a screening you have of the letter? Could you invite this person to your creation care team ministry meeting? Could you invite this person into some of the advocacy work you're doing? There's a lot of different options. And then also, this is maybe after a few conversations, is who would they recommend to invite next? Encouraging people to build this community naturally. Of like, oh, we just had this conversation and you're really energized around this. Do you know anyone else that cares for creation care? And it's a very simple way of just making this ask. We'll go to the next slide. So I would like to invite you guys in the chat to put a little bit of what are your suggestions or what are some of your ideas of why do we need to have conversations with each other? If you want to just put in the chat of just why do we need to have conversations? Why is this important in our faith? But also a huge reason of why it's significant is that we're not meant to be transactional. We see that even in our liturgy, in the richness of our faith as Catholics, is that we're not meant to be transactional. Is to share ideas, perspectives, conversations to enlarge our perceptions. Many people's lived reality with creation care may be a different connection than you have. To support each other, to build community, to break down barriers, and to build communities, and to see we have commonalities, the same goals or focus. Yes, people have different interests, motivations, gifts from God, I would say. And that we can't understand the deepness and the richness of this unless we have this conversation. And to implement different ideas. I'm going to press the next slide, Anna. Is a huge part of it is that we are meant to be known and loved. I'm sure everyone on this call is that we want to be known. that we realize that God calls us each individually and intentionally. And sometimes we live in a world, especially in the US, where it's very easy for us to become individualistic, to just look at myself and what I can do or what I need to do. But in us, we desire to be known and loved and to care for each other. And people show up when they're known. As you guys are just brainstorming right now, I invite you to think of a moment when someone just felt you made known. When you felt that someone really knew you. You know, for myself, I remember in my parish, is a moment I felt really known was when my priest gave me this book that was really concrete to my life. And I was like, oh, I'm known because you thought you saw this book and you thought of me. And then a stronger community creates successful actions and deeper commitment. This is something, these conversations, it's a slow process. You know, sometimes we have lots of energy and we're like, we want to tackle the climate crisis right now. And sometimes the reality is it's huge, but we have a faith that transcends the reality we live on this earth. But as we build this strong community with a deep commitment, you realize that people are coming to your spaces around creation care, to your creation care ministry, with a deep commitment that wanting to show up to each other for each other. And then also that those closest to the problem also know the solutions. That many of us, maybe we have a lived reality that we know the climate crisis because we lived on the front lines of it. That's our everyday reality. But also that people closest to the problem understand how to solve it better than maybe we do, you know, versus where maybe you live somewhere else in your city that you maybe don't face the same realities as someone else. And so when you get to have that conversation, you get to see which realities they live and the different solutions they can have. Can I go to the next slide? So I invite you in the chat to also put some potential questions that you would want to ask this conversation. That if you were going into a conversation, what are some questions you would ask someone to get to know them better? Particularly as you're thinking about this leader from your pilgrimage or from your parish that you would like to invite into this space. Invite into an advocacy action, an action around any ecological event. So what are some questions? What motivates you to do your work for climate change? What do you think your parish should be doing to care for the earth and the poor? Why did you want to come to our pilgrimage? So as you guys are thinking about some more questions, I'm going to share a few questions as well. These are just potential questions. I'm not going in with a hard rule that you have to use these questions. You guys clearly know how to talk to people, to have conversations, that you can definitely go with the flow of the conversation and what is brought up. You know, what are your experience? What are hopes and dreams for the type of person you'd want to be in the world? Excellent suggestions in the chat. And so some other potential questions to ask is, why did you first get involved with creation care? Like sometimes we forget the simple questions of like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here? How is your environment connected to your faith? What inspired you to come to our pilgrimage of hope for creation? What was your experience? What are you most proud of doing for our common home? One of my favorite questions to ask people, because I think it's silly in a great way, is that if you had a magic wand, what changes would you like to see in regards to creation care to kind of break down the barriers that we kind of put on ourselves of like, well, I need to do this, or like, first we need this. Sometimes it's nice to just have people imagine, you know, we think outside of ourselves. This really helps. I'm seeing a lot of other great suggestions in the chat as well. So right now, we're going to invite you into your small group and to talk a little bit about your story. So first, I'm going to model this about what is my story. As I'm talking to you guys, as I'm chatting on this webinar, of why do we need to share our stories? Why do we need to have conversations? So I'll share a little bit about my story and why I'm in this space. For me, growing up, I never really thought of creation care because I grew up in a big family. There were many other things that I was worried about as I was growing up that took more of my attention, especially being in a big family. If anyone's on the call from a big family, I'm sure maybe you can relate, where there's lots of kids, lots of noise, that sometimes those things take priority. But for me, it was in the midst of this chaos. Whenever I went outside, it was a meaningful experience for me to get away from the chaos at times that I experienced. When the world felt a little heavy, when I felt lost, for me was always going to creation and being outside where I saw God's love for me. I would see how he would provide for the birds, how he would provide for the bugs. I, unfortunately for my parents, was a huge bug kid and loved bugs. And so this is something that was a moment for me to see that God did all of this out of his love, that he also loved me. And so that this also led me to love to be engaged in this work, to read the encyclical of Pope Francis when my local friar gave it to me. And then this is ultimately what has led me to this point to engage in these pilgrimages of hope for creation. Because I've seen how interacting with nature and interacting with creation itself brings me hope. That it's life-giving. That it's something that if a flower falls, the plant regrows. And this is a symbol often for my life. In moments where it's rough, is to remember that there's always growth. That sometimes leaves fall, but they always grow back. And to see even in these moments where life is difficult and hard, these pilgrimages give a great significance of hope. That creation simply represents what God has done in my life. And so I invite you also in these small groups as we're about to break you out. That was just a sample story. You guys will have about 12 minutes to just share your guys' story with each other, to practice sharing a brief story of what brings you to be engaged in this work for pilgrimages of hope for creation. And what brings you in the space of creation care? And with that, I'll invite you guys to join your breakout rooms.
Welcome back to the room. I hope that you all had wonderful conversations. We were chatting, we were just hearing from Marilyn about the pilgrimage, the 3-day pilgrimage in California to the Salton Sea and just how powerful it was. One of the things she shared that I just thought was particularly powerful is that, well, two things I'll share quickly. One is about that it was raining. It was drenching them for 1.5 miles, but people were smiling in their ponchos, and just how moved people were by the pilgrimage experience, that she didn't anticipate that. So thank you so much, Marilyn, for sharing. Okay, and then I'll invite you to uh, take that down, and then I'm going to take my spotlight off, actually. And we would love to know, how were you moved by hearing the stories of other people? For those of you who shared in the breakout rooms about your why, a brief overview of why you get involved in this work. It's a sacred moment, I think, to hear these stories. So we're curious to know how it moved you. And I do just want to name, we know you all know how to have conversations. We know you all know how to do this. Like, we're not teaching you anything new. We 100% know that. What we do also know, though, from working with so many of our leaders across the country, is that so rarely do we actually make the time for this, right? It's one of those things, maybe like eating healthy for me, or, like working out. Like, it's like in my head, I know I should do this. How often do I actually do it, right? So this is again that invitation. So as you got a chance to hear from others about their why, about why they got involved in this work, maybe we can have just a couple people share. How did it move you? Don't give like share anything out of turn of what was shared, but just, was there something you heard or an engaging in this process that moved you and impacted you? Don't be shy.
One of the things in our group was the sharing with the interaction of the careful creation with the community. That's something that uh, is so very important. It's it's easy to kind of maybe just get involved with careful creation, thinking of the birds and the animals and so on. But actually, and the harder work, I think, is the connection with the community.
Amen. That's so true, right? The trees don't talk back to me. Would someone else be willing to share?
I was impressed by one, or I was touched by one of our members of our group talking about how this program was designed to parents and oh, and that what it's fun that influences all the
Judy,
um
you're cutting up for us.
system. I'm sorry, from the water system. All so
I'm
it
so
was
sorry, Judy. We can't hear you. I want to know though. Maybe you can put it in the chat. Um, would you be willing to write it out in the chat?
Sorry.
Oh, better. Go ahead.
Yeah, my earbuds don't communicate well with my laptop. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Would you like to share one more time?
Okay, so yeah, so this person,
kids, how what's right in front of you, this piece of candy, how that can affect a local water system all the way to um, the Mississippi.
Well, thank you so much, Judy. I think we lost a little bit, but the power of a water system and absolutely the power of all that. Thank you so much for sharing. Fran, thanks for raising your hand. Go ahead.
So I think the passion that we could see in Judy's face, even if we couldn't hear her voice, that's what I heard in my group is people are so dedicated. And I was moved because um, several of us started out just being in nature and loving nature and then sort of moving, to integrate that with our faith life and also with our political life. And, we're just really working at it. So that's inspiring.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing, Fran. I was speaking with someone just this morning who was talking about, this topic can be uncomfortable politically. Um, but that the fact of the matter is this is our call, right? It's written in Genesis. It's written in Laudato Si. Pope Leo continues to call us to it. This is our call. This is our vocation to till and care for God's creation, and everything is God's creation. And so it can get political outside of the space, but it is core to who we are. And so we got to engage. Thank you. Maybe one or two more people who might be willing to share how hearing other stories moved you.
One of the things that we heard, we had a small group, but and you see here in your group here, a lot of the people who are interested are older people because they want something to hand on to their grandchildren or to pass on. And so we were trying to think about ways to involve families. And so, what we might do in the future. And I'm sitting here thinking, to bring a family together may not be a long pilgrimage walking distances, but it might be a picnic in a natural setting. So it might be just thinking about a different approach and seeing if we can reach out to that group of people in a different way than we would with older people.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mary Beth. So thank you all so much for diving into this process. Again, I will name, we're not trying to teach you anything new. You all could teach us a million things about having conversations. We all know this is important, right? Um, so we just wanted to spend the time to think about it, to think about who are you going to talk to? Because again, So often I know I finish an event and I just run on to the next event that we're doing, right? Life is going so fast. We just have to keep moving and moving along. But you've built a really powerful community of passionate people who are so moved. And so it's important and it's part of our stewarding to take this time to like make this time to really think who were those people popping up for us and to think about building and sharing that relationship and sharing those stories. So, we would love to hear in the chat, what's your next step? Pilgrimages, maybe your walking is done, although I will say Marilyn asked me, are we done? And I said, no, you can still register your pilgrimages. By all means, she said, they just finished one of the ones they'd been planning and people were really inspired, and so they might want to go ahead and do some of their own. Absolutely. Mary Beth was just talking about how to do with families. Absolutely. Keep doing them. That's great. But this pilgrimage that you were working on and planning on might be wrapped up in terms of your steps, but it's not wrapped up in terms of the work. So what is your next step? We invite you to put that into the chat. And you don't need to share names, but so an example would be sending an email to my 5 identified people to set up a coffee conversation to start this next step. And Alyssa dropped into the chat some notes from the slide decks in case you have anything you want to revisit. Inviting these new leaders to our next call. I love that thought, Annie. So we do have another call coming up in December. We'll talk about it in just a minute. So that could be your next invitation. If you're looking for what that invitation is that you end that conversation with, you could invite them to the next call on December 16th. Marilyn's doing this and inviting them to the California LSM Circle, inviting pilgrimage planners to a picnic in December. I love that. Thanks, Linda. Reaching out to participants to invite them to the next Creation Care team meeting and developing a literacy action plan. Get it. I love it. Connect with local chaplains at medical health systems. Okay. I used to be an elementary school teacher, so I'm going to go there. This is the time when I remember them telling us to teach our students, if you write down a goal, you're 80% more likely to actually do it. So go ahead and write down what you're going to do next and when you're going to do it by, right? Those SMART goal things, maybe that's tricking something in your brain about making it done. This is the work of how we continue to grow the movement, how we continue to grow the work of people caring for our common home. Already, all of these pilgrimages are changing the narrative in the United States. People can no longer say this is tangential to our faith, right? People it's changing it's shifting the conversation to say people care for our common home and it is deeply rooted in our faith. And so our job to do in our individual roles is to keep inviting more people in, to keep bringing in those new passions, those new skills, that new information that we were talking about why do we have these conversations. We will continue to shift and evolve to the conversation about family, right? The pilgrimage that I helped plan in my local area, we wanted to make it a family-friendly pilgrimage. And so one of our co-planners said, what we should do is bring pieces of paper and crayons, and then people can make like rubbings of the bark and of rocks and things like that. And it just, everyone was into it, not just the kids. So that was not an idea I would have had, but she brought that idea in. And so that's a mini example of how bringing in other people with other experiences can transform our work. So mark your calendar. Our last webinar for the year is coming up in December. It will be December 16th from noon to 1. We will have some space for reflection, for deepening our faith in Advent, and the organizations, the pilgrimage planning team will go ahead and share with you what our next steps are around looking towards next year and continuing this momentum that we have moved forward. So don't miss it. You want to be there for sure. And invite these people that you've had conversations with. Bring them to December 16th and check in on that. So just again, truly, it is an honor and a privilege to be with you. In this time when the world seems so divisive and we're seeing this increase in wars and violence and so much hurt, getting a chance to read your pilgrimage reports, getting a chance to hear from you about these pilgrimages and seeing these pictures of smiling faces and ponchos, has been the greatest gift to my sense of hope. And I hope it has to yours as well. There are so many people out there doing such good things, and it is all of you, right? And we are together in doing this. We are not standing alone in doing this. So thank you for raising hope. Thanks for being alongside all of us who are working together on this. And we'd like to just end in prayer, inviting the Holy Spirit to continue to journey alongside us as we take these next, perhaps electronic and meeting steps to meet with these people. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Amen. Thank you all so much. Many blessings on the rest of your week and on these conversations you'll be having.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
God bless you.